Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Flames. Today, I am joined by everyone's favorite hockey encyclopedia, Nick Lanciani, to talk about what Jake DeBrusk would bring to the Calgary Flames. And more up next on today's episode of Locked On Flames.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Flames. Today, I bring in Nick to talk about my favorite Bruins player. Nick, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. Got 2 podcasts in today, so that's why my attire is very one team specific.
It's okay. I have there. Oh wait, no, it's on this side. I think. Yeah, it's flipped.
I got the better cover that up with a C. Make it happen.
I know. I wore it on Thursday's show. Spoiler alert: we're pre-recording this, but I was like, I'm not changing. I'm
right.
It's fine.
I don't have a Flames jersey yet, so I kind of can't put a Flames jersey on for this. I also don't have a Flames hat, so if anyone out there wants to send me, any of your stuff, please and thanks.
Now, you don't have a Flames jersey yet, and we'll get into Jake DeBrusk in a second, but who would you get at this very current moment?
I don't know. I mean, Johnny Gaudreau is probably the one that everyone would pick. Sean Monahan. I've always liked Sean Monahan. I don't know how everyone always feels about him all the time. I know you're usually like, he's just so Sean Monahan-y. And I'm like, he's fine. Let him be. He's just a boy.
I call him a poor man's David Krejci. So, I mean.
Exactly. Just let him live on the first and or second line on any given moment.
He's fine.
See, that's the point, is that he exists.
Yeah, he's doing great,
So I probably want to get Sean Monahan for those reasons. I already have a Jonas Donskoy jersey, so I've got my third liners covered.
Yeah, awesome.
It would be hard for me to go with Andrew Mangiapane, only because I like to go through this 5-year rule where a player has to be a part of the team for at least 5 seasons to be not quite a weird investment to make.
Okay, that's fine. He's pushing 3. That's fine.
The way that we tie this together here is like Dougie Hamilton, for example. His time in Boston and his time in Calgary wasn't quite long enough in either place to be like, I'm going to get a Hamilton jersey.
Yeah.
Because then he went to Carolina. And if you were then a Hurricanes fan, you're probably like, and now he's in New Jersey. So if you just like to be like the traveling Yagers, then by all means, collect as many jerseys as you want. And you could get a Jaromir Jagr Flames jersey if you want back in the day. But yeah, I would either go with Gaudreau, because everyone would go with Gaudreau, or switch it up and pick one of the goaltenders.
Yeah.
Flip a coin. Either one is fine with me.
Yeah, exactly. So I never buy jerseys because I'm petrified of this exact situation happening. Been a big Jake DeBrusk gal since, he was drafted and came up, blah, 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 blah. And then I still remember tweeting in 2019 that the Bruins better not trade Anders Bjork or Jake DeBrusk, like right around the trade deadline.
And then look what happened.
Right. And Sarah Sivian, at the time, she was covering the Bruins and was like, I don't think they're going to trade either of them. That would just be silly. Flash forward, and here we are discussing why Jake DeBrusk should move on from his time in Boston. and
in the meantime, the York Sabres jersey looks pretty sweet. I mean, I like the 3D graphics of the crest and everything. I mean, the Flames have that now with the Prime Green initiative, but can't go wrong with the Bjork jersey these days.
No, but why would Jake DeBrusk look great in ketchup and mustard?
Ketchup and mustard. Well, first of all, I'd hope he'd bring a napkin, because he's going to clean up on the ice. Well, realistically, I'd like to take a step forward here and get to the hypothetical. Who would the Flames give up for Jake DeBrusk?
Dillon Dube.
I'm glad we were thinking of the exact same
Yes.
player, because I actually wrote down a few paragraphs to get my head in the zone here. And I won't read them all, but Dillon Dube is the type of guy that you would throw in this deal, given his $2.3 billion cap hit, given DeBrusk 6.75
something like that,
whatever,
just under 4.
just under 4, and his next qualifying offer is going to have to be 4 and change, which means if you're the Flames and you want to get this done, you're going to have to move some salary the other way. The Bruins could retain 50%, and you'd still have to give up a guy like Dillon Dube. And the Bruins might want a guy like Dillon Dube. He's a couple of years younger than Jake DeBrusk. He's a center, at least according to NHL.com. If you look at Cap Friendly, they show him as just a generic forward.
He goes where he's needed. He's been playing a lot on the wing, and I feel like he's very much like the Sam Bennett experiment, much better on a wing.
And might just be better in a change of scenery, which is kind of how people have felt, at least if you're trying to run Jake DeBrusk out of town in Boston, how that type of fan base has felt. Whereas if you're me, I mean, he's great. He's a really nice guy. He does a lot of great things on and off cameras. And I get where he's coming from because of an alleged rift that is in the room or whatever it is. Allegedly, not that I've heard anything or not, but like you're not looking at a situation where a team's trying to bring in JT Miller and you're wondering, does this guy love the city or is this guy well liked by his teammates?
Right.
In either case, I've heard both sides of horrible things. With Jake DeBrusk, you don't hear anything bad. It's just that he needs to get a change of scenery for his own purpose, not so much for his own career, not so much for whatever reason. He just wants to make a change. And for someone that's 25 years old, that's totally fine. We have to remember that they are people outside of being hockey players.
Right. Like most 25-year-olds will like go out and like give themselves bangs, or, they'll buy their first expensive car, whatever it may be. But Jake DeBrusk is not a normal 25-year-old.
Right.
He's a professional
really
athlete.
It all comes down to the price. And the Flames, it's imperative that they add without subtracting at the 2022 NHL trade deadline, which is coming up on March 21st, 3 p.m. Eastern, if anyone wants to know the exact time.
So 1 p.m. Calgary time.
Local time in Calgary.
Mountain time.
Good old mountain time. I've been there. Not Calgary, but mountain time once. Next time I'll go to Calgary. But, DeBrusk would bring a lot to the table within the top 9 in the aspects that you want to add to. The Flames have already made the 2 biggest acquisitions since the offseason to this point. Blake Coleman might have been the best player available in free agency, and the Flames went out and signed him, which I loved that. Again, it's not that he's a top 6 guy that's going to change the team overnight as a once-in-a-generation player, but he brings all the right assets to the table. He has the right skill set to get this team a little bit further than where they've been before, because they've always had a solid core, but they've just been missing that piece or two to get them over the hump or get them past the, for example, Colorado Avalanche in the first round.
Yeah.
Or, the Dallas Stars, because that was more recent.
And that's the thing is like this, when everyone last year was talking about blowing this team up, I was not buying into it at all because first of all, no one's going to take some of these contracts. Like, no. Number 2, you would be absolutely silly to trade a player like Matthew Tkachuk. And, you're not going to
You would move Gaudreau before you move Tkachuk, typically, if you're going to commit to, like a Bruins-centric sort of thing. If you're going to move on from Joe Thornton and stick with Patrice Bergeron, that's what you'd be doing.
Exactly. And the thing here is, there was no need. Like, there was so much talent, and there is so much talent in that room that it just was a matter of finding a coach who could work with the team. And I think with a departure or two, there were, it was a lot easier to work with, and, you're going with the flow instead of against the grain. And just because the Flames don't have a captain right now, like a named captain, doesn't mean that they're without leadership or without, a spokesperson in the room, if you will.
Right. And ultimately, to me, it's a matter of, okay, all that they need to do is add to what they've had. And
Mm-hmm.
as long as they keep dropping the hammer from February to March into April in the regular season schedule, they'll be in a lot better shape than in years past where they haven't quite had enough, or they back themselves into the playoffs despite, leading the league for like 90% of the season.
Yeah.
This year, they're coming in a little bit under the radar, despite being one of the best teams in the Western Conference. They're still being, just out-talked on radio stations across the country, on
Because
podcasts
they're a Western
across the
team.
Locked On Network, because exactly, they're the Western team that you watch at like 10 o'clock at night on the East Coast. And, the Tampa Bay Lightning are two-time defending Stanley Cup champions. So, of course, they could win 3 in a row. Yeah,
Right.
anything can happen. Make the playoffs first. Anything can happen. So Calgary already got Blake Coleman. Great thing to do in free agency.
Yeah.
Valentine's Day rolls around and they're feeling the love and they acquire Tyler Toffoli. And
Yeah.
what do you know? That turns out to be really good. I mean, you got rid of Pitlick, which still
You got
don't know
rid
if
of
he's
one
ever
Tyler
scored.
for another. It was a significant upgrade.
That Tyler for Tyler trade as opposed to Tyler for Taylor or whatever, but split over like 11 years. It all works out in the end for Calgary because they're in great shape. If they go out and get a Jake DeBrusk, if they go out and get anything at the deadline, great. If they don't, they've already done their homework, they've done their research, and they've prepared to the very best that they can get to be going down the stretch. Whether or not we see a rematch of the 2004 Stanley Cup final, I don't know. And would that go a different way this time around? Hopefully for Flames fans.
So.
But I mean, I also don't think that Tampa is necessarily guaranteed to make it back to the Stanley Cup final. That said, you look around at the rest of the Eastern Conference and, well, who is legit a playoff contender or a cup contender among the 8 teams that are already decided in the Eastern Conference,
right,
with over a month left in the season, about 2 months, technically speaking.
I would say Tampa, Florida, and Carolina.
And everyone else outside of that could easily be out in the first round.
Right.
So
I mean, it's hockey. Like, you think that back in 2019 that Columbus is going to go in and get swept, but instead they pulled the Uno reverse. And that's the beautiful thing about hockey, is that you never know what could happen, and it's not predictable. Like, everyone was panicking last year. Oh my God, the Leafs are finally going to leave the first round. No, they did not.
It'll happen someday, but
someday, just not
when they
last
play
year.
Montreal.
Yeah. But we're going to take a quick break here, and then we'll dive right back into some more fun potential hypotheticals and whatnot. But first, let's talk about some snacks. Nick, are you a fan of snacks?
I love snacks, salty snacks, sweet snacks, all snacks.
Well, then I have the perfect snack for you. If you are someone who enjoys the sweet and salty snacks, Built Bars are the perfect snack for you because they are covered in 100% chocolate and they taste like a candy bar, except they're not, and they're so much better for you. And when I'm eating healthy, I tend to get these god-awful cravings where I'm like, oh, I just want to eat like a box of like Reese's peanut butter cup eggs. Well, Built Bar has you covered there with a delicious peanut butter chocolate protein bar that you can get for 15% off when you use promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. Well, thank you everyone for sticking around and making Locked On Flames your first listen of the day. As always, it's a pleasure to have you tuned in with me. And this week I have a guest, Nick. First of all, how are the Bruins doing right now? I know that they're in the middle of playing.
That they are. Stealing me away from the TV. It's fine.
I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine. They're playing Vegas. I expect it to go away or a different way. Their 6-game road trip that they've been on has brought them through Seattle, all of California, and Vegas and Columbus. Now you expect them to win at least like 3 of the games I've just mentioned, and to maybe lose 3 of the games that they've either played already or will play. They just lost in Anaheim on the second night of back-to-back nights. They won 7-0 in Los Angeles on Monday. They lost Tuesday.
And who
for
had a
second
hat
night.
trick?
Couldn't remember
Who
what
had
day
a
it was.
hat trick in that game?
Jake DeBrusk, who
Yeah.
has had like 9 points in his last 6 or 7 games, depending on if you want to consider underway right now, Thursday night, going to be Friday's episode. So, I mean, that's pretty good. But they've also been a team that kind of at times has been like just above 500, where you're like, well, they're good, but they're not like great.
Right, they're not dominating. Like, and I think that's been like one of the more obscure things to watch. Like, as a Bruins fan, you know, you're used to them going on like these insane tears, and kind of like what Calgary fans are experiencing this year. And it hasn't been like that for Boston.
Which was going to be inevitable. You know, going back to the whole like, okay, so if you come down to a DeBrusk and Dube trade with obviously some draft picks involved, because why not?
Right. Make it
The
pretty.
Bruins are thinking long term, we need to find the next first or second line center, or at the very least, a placeholder a la Philip Danault in his tenure with Montreal. Granted, that was kind of more long term than you might have originally thought before he signed with Los Angeles in free agency. But that's the type of deal that you need to make, given how Jack Studnicka's development has been fine. He hasn't been putting up the points at the NHL level yet, but he also has only played like 20 games max.
Right.
So I'm not expecting him to come in and be the one to replace, you know, a David Krejci or a Patrice Bergeron, who have combined played like 2,000 games for the organization.
Well, first of all, at least your roster allows for the youth to come up and play a game or two. Meanwhile, we have Brett Ritchie.
The Flames have loaded up on a lot of veterans, for better or worse.
Yeah, I call that the waiver line because it's just a bunch of old people on the fourth line. Unless Adam Ruzicka is in, which I don't think he is right now. I could very well be lying to you. But, you know, it's just Brett Ritchie, Brad Richardson, Trevor Lewis. There's no one else
Couple of cup winning pedigree guys there.
Yeah.
Obviously, Brett Ritchie. No. Not to rag on him too much, because he is in the NHL and I'm not, and that's
right.
You know, something we can debate another day. But
Brett Ritchie, that man. But Dillon Dube. Let me tell you about this wonderful, precious child that
You're not only trying to convince the Boston fan base, but quite possibly Don Sweeney, who I've personally recommended this podcast to.
Yeah,
of course.
I've
not lying or anything.
I've totally sent him the link to like every Bruins related episode ever. But number one, he's a Calgary guy. And so right there, you know, and Jake DeBrusk is an Edmonton guy. So, you know, there's a little bit of rivalry, but
might be an issue when the Battle of Alberta commences.
Exactly. But Dillon Dube is just, he's a good player. Like, I think that he's reached his ceiling in Calgary. I don't think that, you know, he's necessarily had a true permanent spot, like, in the roster, because last year he was floating up on the first line, then he was on the fourth line, and he was centering the third line. Like, there was just never anything consistent with him.
He kind of just hasn't been given the time in general.
Yes.
He came into the league a year after Jake DeBrusk. DeBrusk came in 17-18, played full seasons.
Yep.
Hasn't played fewer than like 41 games, and that was just in the 56-game season last year. And Dube, in the meantime, has played 25 games in his first season.
Yeah.
And then full seasons thereafter.
Yeah.
A little bit like how Brad Marchand came into the league.
Yes. And it's frustrating because, like, you know, you obviously want, especially like a local guy, but especially a kid, to come in and, you know, have the opportunity to succeed. And he is so fun to, like, watch on camera. He went to a bunch of Stampeders games over the summer, and he took the time out of his busy day to take pictures with the fans. Like, he wasn't sitting anywhere fancy. He was literally on the
Very down to
bleachers.
earth, as they say.
Yeah, that's thank you. Very humble, down to earth. You wouldn't, you know, I I mean this in the nicest way, but he's very generic looking. Like, he's not someone that I would necessarily be like, "Oh my god, that's Dillon Dube," like, out in public. So, I think that bodes well for, in a city like Boston where it's a little more populated.
You can kind
But,
of blend in. There's a
yeah,
game one time I got out of work that Adam McQuaid just walked through an entire crowd of people, and no one was like, "Oh my god, it's Adam McQuaid." I was like,
he's
"How is
so
this happening
handsome.
right
Why
now?"
wasn't it like what?
I mean, there's that, but, like, everyone that knows the 2011 roster
Right.
would immediately flock to that person. Like, Michael Ryder probably will never have to pay for a drink in Boston ever
No.
again because he's Michael Ryder.
Right.
So, why people weren't looking at Adam McQuaid and at least, like, waving to him, I didn't understand.
Yeah. But, Dillon Dube, great guy. I think that if you give him the time and the consistency of a solid roster spot with strong players around him, like, that's not a knock to Calgary's roster,
Like a guy like
obviously.
Taylor Hall and David Pastrnak, it could
Yeah.
really elevate his play.
Right. And
Not
I
that
think
Eric
that
Hall is playing above his level of competition right now, but, like, that's kinda what happens when you're surrounded by stars.
right. And there's just a certain level to you wanna reach, and I think that if anyone can learn, like, is a young guy who's still relatively young in his career and has the chance, and I think that, like I said, he's very likable. I feel like I'm trying to sell you someone, for, like, The Bachelor,
Right?
but
And the weird thing is, like, we thought of the same player to
right,
begin with without saying, like, "Hey,
without
are you thinking of Dillon
conversing.
Dubé?"
I
And
sent you show notes 2 minutes before we jumped on this call.
and then I also wanted to point out that, like, Boston's whole thing with Jake DeBrusk is to avoid pulling a reverse Cam Neely.
Yeah.
You know what I mean by that? When the Vancouver Canucks were like, "Yeah, this Neely kid, he probably won't pan out to be that much. I mean, we've
Mhm.
given him so many chances. Boston's offering us Barry Peterson. Peterson, an established NHL veteran." And, well, Brad
Ooh,
Marchand is, like, 2 goals away from tying Cam Neely for one of the top 5 spots in goals in
right.
franchise history. So, there's that.
Yeah,
Jake DeBrusk, in the meantime, would be the Cam Neely, except he's already proven himself as an NHLer. He can score goals. Will he get to 30 ever is a different question, but a 20 goal scorer every season isn't that
it's
bad of a
not
thing.
bad, especially when they can produce in the playoffs, and I think that is something that Calgary is really going to be looking for and looking at, especially if they can get someone at a low price or,
Right.
that doesn't come with that $7 million cap hit or something
And that
insane.
speaks to the fact that Jake DeBrusk has all the cards right now
Yeah,
because he has the negotiating power with other teams to talk about potential extensions. That also brings in a downside a little bit in that, if he talks to, say, the Arizona Coyotes and they're saying, "We're going to offer you long term, lots of money." Cool. But what if he doesn't want to go to the Coyotes because he wants to win right now?
right,
Then he can just nix that trade and be like,
right,
"No, Boston, I'm not going to listen to this." And now the Flames are still looking for someone. Now, if the Flames
exactly.
come in and say, "Here's the plan, it might take us to kind of being in an awkward situation, reminiscent of the days of Antoniemi in Chicago, but not entirely the same," because back then Niemi was with the organization for many years and got into that role, won the cup, and then was like, "What do you mean you don't want to pay for a goaltender?
Right,
I'm your goaltender," and they went to San Jose. In this case, it would kind of be like that in the sense that Calgary doesn't really have that much cap space. Before trying
I,
to
like, can't
even
even think
create
about it.
this DeBrusk for Dubé trade, the Flames have about 800,000, roughly, a little more, a little less, to deal with at the deadline itself.
Yeah,
So you're gonna have to get kind of creative. And then, when you plan ahead for the next 2 or 3 seasons, how much are you willing to pay Jake DeBrusk?
right,
Do you look at him and say, "Would you take a 2-year bridge deal worth $2 million a season?" Or does he come back and say, "I want 6 years at $4 million. It's a little less than my qualifying offer, sure, but it comes with 6 years," as opposed to a 1-year extension.
right.
should you get to that point where you just give them the offer, you can't touch that money while you're trying to sign other people. You sign other people, and then eventually it comes around to the idea that, yeah, sure, for 1 year I'll do this, and then we'll renegotiate. And if you score 50 goals, it's great for him, not great for Calgary.
Exactly. And I think the thing is with this cap space is, again, trying to make Calgary the most attractive team that you can while you have the opportunity, but also kind of hope that some of your stars are willing to
Stick
not take,
around
yeah, and kind
on
of
a
take
little
like
bit
a
of a discount.
little bit of a team-friendly deal because Matthew Tkachuk's qualifying offer is $9 million.
So if you do that math real quick, you could spend almost 15 million. We're just going to round up for the sake
Yep.
of pretending that you don't have any of that money to begin with.
Yep.
Not to knock Flames fans down a little bit, but just to
It's
get into the mindset
we
of the
are a
general manager.
realistic group on Locked On Flames. So I enjoy the critical thinking skills.
Critical thinking was one of my favorite things in school.
Me too.
I have no
I
idea.
excelled at those reading comprehension, explain your answer. Say less.
Math can't do it, but when you want to explain, like, why did this happen and then this subsequently,
I got you. There's your 5-paragraph essay.
right? MCAS, on the other hand, no.
Oh, I don't know if y'all have standardized testing in Canada, but
Probably not. I would hope not.
no, probably not because they're like not us. They aren't defined by their education. And
First of all, Canada is like, let's teach the kids like 2 languages at least
right.
simultaneously, and not like by the time you get to middle school, you get to choose. And then
Right.
if you're me, you pick Spanish because first of all, Spanish is awesome and amazing, but then you go travel to Montreal like 5 years later, and you're like, well, it's not quite French, but
why do you think I will not go with my work friends? None of us know French. So it would be very bad.
I thankfully had a teacher in first grade that taught us, first grade level French, but that only gets me so far at Tim Hortons in Quebec City.
Yeah. So what were we talking? Oh, cap space. Yeah, so the Flames gotta get a little creative, and I say this, and I've said it since the beginning of the season. Out of Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau, I think that Johnny is more likely to take a team-friendly deal, and that is not to knock Matthew Tkachuk because we do love him. We do love the rat wife on this show, but he should go chase that bag the same way Brady did. And I think that he has that outside influence from his father.
And for Johnny Gaudreau, it's a simple thing of being around long enough to see what the Nathan McKinnons across the league have done, or what Patrice Bergeron has done his entire career, where if you just take a couple million less, you can keep a guy like Matthew Tkachuk in town, or you can have a guy like Mikko Rantanen in town, or you can have David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, and Brad Marchand, all at less of the cost than half the Toronto Maple Leafs first line, whatever it is.
No, exactly. And that's the very important part of all of this.
And then you could just be like, let's blow up the CBA and go with, a luxury tax or whatever.
Right, which would be so much better.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Does it matter? Does any of this matter?
Could you imagine if, like, one day you wake up and you're like, oh, Austin Matthews has signed a $350 million contract over the next 10 years. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
But that's what we see in baseball.
And more likely Premier League, given baseball's in a lockout currently.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar in the hockey realm.
Right. But is there anything else you want to add to Jake DeBrusk's
to his resume?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, how we can
great guy, loves the game. He's not Phil Kessel, but, maybe he likes hot dogs. I don't know. We just have to send some guy in Toronto out there to find out.
We'll figure it out. He's pretty good. He's pretty neat. I think that he is. I think he'd easily become a fan favorite in Calgary, and especially
anywhere.
If he can, anywhere. But I mean, I'm selfish.
In this episode, we're sending him to Calgary, whether he likes it or not.
Right. He's getting airdropped. And you know what? I don't know if I'm going to get flack for saying this, but I am someone who looks at players as human beings. And I know that DeBrusk is a very big family man who loves his mom, loves his dad, loves that adorable dog. Would being back in Alberta, closer in proximity to his family, help him?
Possibly. I mean, I think he's in a much better place now compared to during the pandemic.
Yes.
But I mean, you also don't want to get too far into what we do or don't know or
Right,
speculate
exactly.
about
Like, you
a
can't
player's mental
speculate, and
health.
that's
As we said, they're human beings.
right.
There are no such thing as heroes, just people that do courageously brave things at a time when they're required to or step up to do because it wasn't a requirement and they still did it anyway. So Jake DeBrusk is human.
Right.
Let's see how
Let's
he can flourish
treat him like
and
one.
help him to grow as an individual, as opposed to being like, well, why won't you talk to the media after requesting a trade? He never came out and said, I want to be traded. Technically, it was the agent that did that.
Right. And then the
and he
media
doesn't necessarily owe anything to people thereafter beyond when something happens, explaining, hey, this was the reason, or this is something that I won't go into a reason about until you write a memoir 20 years after you play the game or something.
Right. And then you also have to factor in that the person who, or someone from the media, Boston media, was tweeting about Jake DeBrusk and then started arguing with Jake's mother on Twitter. So why would he want to address the media if they're going to be disrespectful towards his mom? Why?
Yeah. Not great.
No.
Calgary won't do that.
No. I think the comparison in Calgary with their media person, I think they know a little bit of boundaries. They get block happy on Twitter. But
it happens.
Coming up next, we'll round out the show with our winners and losers of the week. But first, we are going to talk about BetOnline AG. No, betonline.net. I am so sorry they changed their website name. BetOnline probably has a fantastic prop and bet for where Jake DeBrusk is going to land and where other trade deadline targets are going to land as well. But from the latest odds, totals, player performance props, betonline.net has you covered for your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. Head on over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, for those of you who are new here, hello, hi. On Fridays, I end the show with winners and losers of the week, similar to how Toronto does their winners and losers of the weekend on Mondays, but we just switch it up.
You just do it ahead of them.
Right.
Look behind, given it's like last week tonight from last week or this week or something. We'll get John Oliver in here. He'll sort it out.
Exactly. So do you want to start off with a winner or a loser? Since you're the guest, I'll let you go first.
Well, should we pick a player or a team for the first winner or loser?
Well, I'm going with a league for my loser.
Okay.
So
would you like to explain?
Yes, I'm going with
Love how I just flipped that back at you.
Right? I'm going with the WNBA for fining the New York Liberty for chartering planes and $500,000 because they wanted their players to travel comfortably and not miss flights anymore. And that's been a huge issue in the WNBA. And it's supposedly against the CBA, but the owners were like, no, like we can fund flights for the entire league for the next 3 years. And other owners were like, no, like players are going to get too comfortable with that. So no, we'll keep flying commercial.
Professional players that have risen in their standards since the NBA took over the mainstay of we're actually going to invest in this product, NHL. Not saying that
for the record,
nearly
Nick
enough.
said that, not me. Please.
Right? That was me saying that I would love to see some sort of resolution between the Professional Hockey Federation and every entity that has something to say about the women's game being, for some reason, less than what it actually is, because it's incredible what they do from a night to night basis, and more recently in the growth of their branding and interaction with the fans and other communities that just surround themselves around the game itself or sports in general. The audience is there. Put it on TV like the WNBA and people will watch. And a winner this week might just be the US women's national soccer team.
Yep.
To an extent, because there's always still going to be an issue, turf, for example. But Turner Sports getting the contract for 2023 and beyond, a tremendous thing.
Huge.
Because a lot of people have TNT and TBS available to them. Of course, you might have to get HBO Max as well. But, here's my recommendation to Turner Sports. Put the women's games on TV. Put the men's games on HBO Max. The women's team is better.
The women's team is better. And, I'm not just saying this as, a women's sports, propagandist. But, there's a clear difference in the product.
Yes.
And
for starters, the women's team makes the World Cup every 4 years. Right. The men's team doesn't.
No. And coming out of last weekend when I was down helping the Metropolitan Riveters on their game day stuff, there was a New Jersey Devils practice right before the game. And people were like, I've heard of this team, but I don't know where to watch it. None of the local newspapers are covering it, nothing. And I was like, well, that's my job to help you and to help the media.
You can tune in to.
So thank you so much for helping and letting me know, because that's feedback you don't know you're giving the right person. Right. But it's also you share a practice facility with the Devils. Why aren't the Devils also?
What is the definition of this partnership, if anything?
Right.
And as of right now, I think they don't officially have anything beyond being just use our practice facility, because
as far as I'm aware,
it's one of 3 rinks in the area available to you.
Right. Basically. But, I don't know. I'm hopeful. I think that there are a lot of amazing things going on in women's sports, especially last week or the week before. No, it was the beginning of, I don't remember when it was. It was recently when the women's soccer team, the U.S. national team, won that lawsuit. They settled the lawsuit for a big chunk of money. And I know obviously it gets delegated to different players and whatnot, but to have that be seen and be heard is huge.
More than just symbolic or, your minor little oh, well, we let you agree to play in this tournament for X, Y, or Z, but you're still going to have to fight over the same thing the next tournament.
Exactly.
As what has happened to the U.S. women's hockey team in, say, the World Championship venue of arenas. Again, another winner, PHF in the Tampa Bay Isabel Cup playoffs announcement, and the logo more so. I just want to talk about the logo looking incredible.
The logo is so fun.
Right?
And the colors used are just gorgeous.
And you compare that to the supposed leak that has appeared for the 2022 Stanley Cup final, which is oh, I see we're going the route that MLB and the NBA went for their World Series and NBA finals, which is the most generic font that you can find.
Yeah.
And well, in this case, they threw the Stanley Cup in there, which cool. I encourage sports leagues to have the trophy in the championship logo itself. But so when are we going to have it say sponsored by YouTube TV at some point? Because
literally, that's what's
that's
next.
why they've made this logo.
Right. And I think for my winner, I don't know which sponsorship it was, and I'm sorry for that, but my winner is whoever that sponsorship was, that paid out all the tickets so PHF fans could go to the game for free. And
Yes.
I think that that's super awesome. Honestly, I think I'm going to go down to Tampa because, one, I need a
You absolutely
vacation.
should, first of all.
Like, yes, I work for the Rivs, but like also like I need a vacation.
It's Tampa. It's nice there. I was just thinking about how it's still winter here and
Yeah.
hating it earlier today.
Yeah, like I'm freezing. I've looked at flights. I'm like, just get me on a plane and get me some
I want to wear
hockey.
shorts for once.
Right? Like, so I'm very happy to see that the game is becoming more accessible, especially in terms of the women's product,
Yes.
because it's so good. It's a blast to watch, and just the personalities in the league are on a whole different level.
Where else can you get a storyline of, competitors going against one another and then going home and being like, "Hey, so do you
Right.
want to get pizza tonight?" Or, like,
Right,
what
like
what are we doing here?
right, "Do you wanna
Sorry
pull
about
some
winning
gas,
earlier.
or do you want me to run in and pay?" Like, it's so awesome, and you
Need to see some of that in the NHL one of these days.
right? Like
At anyone in the NHL, just like go home. It doesn't even have to be someone in a relationship. It can just be like Jamie Drysdale and his roommate being like, "We beat this team tonight. I had a goal. You didn't. I've got, Chipotle on speed dial. Let's celebrate with burritos." We need
exactly.
some of the everyday comfort food content in
Right.
our daily lives.
Yeah, I swear to God,
It
uh
makes the players seem more like us.
right, like, when I went over to Anya and Madison Packer's house for media day, and Anya, like, she had the whole thing catered, but then at the end of the night, I forget which player it was. I think it was, Brooke Avery. She ordered a pizza, and I had never seen this before, but there was, like, penne and
Oh,
sauce on
yeah.
the pizza, and I was like, "That is so cool."
I've seen that once or twice.
I've never
Don't
seen
know if I
that.
would go for it, but
It's delicious. I mean, it's all carbs, so
well,
that's my shtick, so
carbs are great and
yeah.
all. Not running
Also
a
another
marathon the
winner.
next day, though.
Yeah. So do you have a loser of the week?
Other than Beck's classic song. No, let's see. There was a team that did lose a lot, but then they won the other night, and that would be the Seattle Kraken. But
They won
since
a
they
game?
didn't lose their 8th game in a row, they aren't a loser of the week. The Ottawa Senators are currently on a 3-game losing streak, so I guess they're kind of a loser of the week
Yeah. Yeah.
by default. But there is no This Week in the Ottawa Senators, as I often say on my show. I have a whole segment just devoted to the chaos around the NHL.
Yeah.
Usually it comes out of Ottawa,
That's
but
what
this
we do
week,
on Western Conference Wednesday. It's almost always Arizona or Vegas. For a while, it was San Jose with Evander Kane, but
now it's Edmonton with
yeah.
Evander Kane.
Yeah.
San Jose, I think I give them a little bit of a loser of the week sort of status, though, because going into this year, they were all saying, like, we're a playoff team. They're not. They have a minus 25 goal differential. They're 7th in the Pacific Division, below the Vancouver Canucks, only by 4
Ooh.
points. And we can talk about how the Pacific Division in general is separated by, like, just doing the math real quick, a lot of points between Calgary and Seattle. But the
Yeah.
first, like, 3 spots are all within 10 points, maybe even 7 or 5, depending on the day that you look at it. But the San Jose Sharks have a minus 25 goal differential. I'm excluding Seattle from this because they're expansion team, and turns out expansion teams can be like expansion teams. It's not all Vegas every 100 years, apparently.
Right.
But San Jose is just so disappointing. You would expect it with the goaltending situation going into the season. You didn't quite expect it given the forward group and the defense. Sure, they might have depth issues. It might be like how Calgary was a few years ago, except Calgary was still playoff contenders.
Somehow.
The Sharks aren't nearly at that level where they want to be, where they said they'll be. And,
Right.
well, now we're starting to think about, okay, so you're a lot of points away from even having the possibility of really being in contention for the lottery for Shane Wright this July. But hope for the best. I mean, if you want, like, there's always that chance.
Yep.
Joe Pavelski's not walking through that door, though. He's in Dallas these days, and Joe
Love
Thornton
him.
definitely isn't going to walk him back, because he could very well win his first cup with the Florida Panthers.
Remember when Florida used to be like the last stop?
Yeah, like, Scott Gomez would go there and you'd be like, okay,
right.
That's fun to see. And then Brian Campbell played there briefly.
And I would say Brian Boyle too, but he ended up.
He's played like everywhere at this point.
Yeah, he's
the new Lee Stempniak.
Yeah, seriously. Oh my God, where is he? He's in Pittsburgh now.
That he is.
Oh my God.
San Jose, I mean, all the other teams that we've just expected to be bad have been bad. But this was the week that they decided to be like, yeah, we'll admit it now. Like, we don't know what to do. We have to trade people. But we signed terrible contracts, and now you're stuck.
Yeah, and their one redemption point is that they're apparently not shopping Hurdle. So, they've got that, I guess. But
so instead of talking Hurdle for Dube, you had me come on and talk DeBrusk for Dube. That was the overarching plan here, ladies and gentlemen.
The magic of it all. So thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Flames. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, and follow me on Twitter at Jess Belmosto. Nick, please plug all of your work and where we can find you on social media.
I will do no such thing. I'm just kidding. So I have my own website, Down the Frozen River, downthefrozenriver.com. Simple enough. You can go there for occasional things that I'll try to write a lot more of, and usually Bruins recaps and Bruins notes and things. And also have a podcast, Down the Frozen River. You can also find that on downthefrozenriver.com. You've typically been updating that every week. Sometimes it goes like 10, 14 days in between, but we talk about all things in the NHL. So if you like more than just Calgary things, or you want to hear about a thing outside of what's going on at Stampede this year, then listen to that maybe, or don't. Yeah. It's fine.
No, you should listen to it. Listen to it.
And at Lanciani53 on Twitter, if you feel like following me for random hockey stats and things.
Truly the encyclopedia of hockey, and anybody who listens can fully jump on board the Hire Lancey train. So
please do.
Thank you so much for stepping away from the Bruins game to.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my God, of course. Always. It's always a pleasure. It's almost been a year since I texted you and was like, I need you to come on. Daryl Sutter has been brought on. So
and look at what's happened now.
Yeah, seriously.
Everything that's old is new again. Like, I'm going to go play NHL 2001 after this.
Right. I plan on doing like a whole year of Sutter kind of episode, and would love to have some outside voices come on. So I'm sure I will persuade you or beg you to come on that show.
You don't have to beg me. I don't have anything going on.
Well, that is all, and we will see you on Monday. Bye, guys.
Bye, Flames fans.